Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, if you don't mind. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to our community, a safe place, public safety. As we can see, this is going to be an intimate forum, but that's okay, because we know that the folks who are here are going to make this discussion happen. So as folks come into the room, encourage them to come up front so that we can all be together in this intimate setting and share ideas and share conversation. My name is Jan Glenn Davis, and I'll be one of your facilitators today. A little bit about me. I am a mother of three. I live in the Bay Area, was born and raised in California. And by profession, I'm a law enforcement officer. I've been in law enforcement for about 28 years now. And for the last 2 years, I've served as the Deputy Chief of Police with the BART Police Department. I'd like to introduce you to my co-facilitator, Chet Hewitt.
Good morning. My name is Chet Hewitt. I'm the President and CEO of the Sierra Health Foundation. We're actually headquartered in Sacramento, California. But some of you may remember me. For 7 years, I was the Director of Social Services here in Alameda County. Worked to build a new building on San Pablo, and do some other things around 460. I'm quite proud of it in this community as well. So it's good to be back. I actually still live in the Bay Area. I commute every day. Looking forward to the conversation.
And as your facilitators, all that means is that we're responsible for making sure that the flow occurs, that we keep this conversation going. For our pastors on the board, that means we're responsible for the order of service. Can I get amen, Pastor?
Amen.
All right. So we're going to just make sure that we do that. I think one of our most important duties is to make sure that we don't talk too much. So we're going to try not to do that. And we're going to help the panel members kind of stay on course too, because we want to make sure that we save at least 30 minutes and perhaps even more at the end of this conversation for your questions. That's oftentimes the most important part of any type of community discussion that takes place. We want to hear from you. So just a couple of ground rules as we talk about how we're going to do this. For everybody, and first of all, I know everybody in this room is important, and we have to be available via our cell phones. I do understand that. But what we need everybody to do is, if you can't turn your cell phone off, please put it on vibrate. Okay? Again, we don't want to have the flow of the discussion interrupted by ringing phones. So if you could do that for us, that would be great. We got about 1 hour and 15 minutes to make this entire conversation, meaningful conversation, happen. And the only thing that we ask is that we are respectful of each other as we venture into this dialogue. We know that folks are going to have different opinions, and if we can agree to disagree without being disagreeable, it'll all be good. Our collective goal today is to highlight and propose civic engagement models that have the potential to work within our respective communities and organizations in support of families and individuals. And again, I know that this is important for me, having a family in this community, but I know it's equally as important to you as well as everyone on this board. So, Chet?
Thank you, Jan, and we're going to make sure we get, as Jan said, started as soon as we possibly can so we can get involved in the conversation. But in order to do so, let me just give you a little bit about the structure or flow of today as well, a little bit more. We have 3 questions. We're going to ask panelists to respond to those questions. Not all panelists. They've been assigned a question to respond to, some actually 2. And we're going to let folks who have something additional to say, not repetitive, to chime in as well. So we'll do that as we get to the conclusion of the questions. We're then going to open it up. It's going to be an open forum. And folks can stand, and you may have a question for one of the panelists. You may have a comment you might want to make. That's okay, too. You might have an idea you want to share. That's great. And we really want to encourage you. I know that the folks who have convened this really want to hear from you as much as we hear from the panelists as well. Both, as Jan said, are important. All right? So let me introduce our panelists. We have Chief Howard Jordan, Chief of the Oakland Police Department.
Okay,
let's welcome him, yeah. We have John Burris from the Law Office of John Burris, very well-known attorney. We have Pastor Zachary Carey from True Vine Ministries. Pastor. We have Pastor Michael McBride. And we have Robin Bonner, who's a youth organizer for the Center for Young Women's Development. And so even if people are coming in, please come in, find a seat, even if it's on the inside of the circle. And so we're going to start with the first question, which is, do you or your organization advocate for a specific model for the prevention and or reduction of violence in our communities? And if you do have a model, could you please explain why and how that model actually works? And the two respondents to this question is going to be Chief Jordan, who will be followed by Robin Bonner.
And panelists, you feel free to stand up, or you can stay at your seats. This is a microphone. You know, do what you like.
Thank you, and it's good to be the lead-off hitter. Good morning, and my name is Howard Jordan, Chief of Police. And in response to the question, our primary crime prevention model has been the Operation Ceasefire. This is a model that's worked in a number of large cities, such as Chicago, New York, High Point, North Carolina, Stockton, and San Francisco. And we've been working with the California Partners for a Safe Community. This is a consultant group that's made up of folks that have studied this model over the years. They're a byproduct of the David Kennedy School in at the John Jay College in New York. And what Ceasefire is to us is it allows us to, one, focus on the group of people that are causing the most problems in terms of violent crime. That is shootings and murders. Ceasefire reduces the recidivism rate, and we feel that that's a big step in the right direction. It also helps us to prevent us from arresting people over and over again, and increasing the incarceration numbers in the state prison. So,
speaking to the mic, it's kind of hard to hear you.
I am. I don't think there's amplification here.
There is no room amplification. The audio is just for picking up on camera. Yeah, if you can speak up or come forward or both.
I'll try not to shout. Is this better? Maybe I'll wait till people settle down so they can we can have a little quiet. But ceasefire is our operating principle. It is something that the department has used as our central strategy for reducing violent crime. It focuses on three main components. One is the law enforcement component, which is heavy on enforcement. Two, there's a strong community outreach, very strong community outreach, which is coordinated with our faith-based community. Pastor McBride has been a part of that program. He's been an active member, so is Pastor Carey and his clergy. But it is a heavy focus on the community, because we want the community to take ownership of reducing violent crime in Oakland. We want the community to speak out and tell people that we want them to put the guns down. We want them to stop the shootings and the murders. And the only way for this program to be successful is by community members taking an active role. So ceasefire, the second component, has a lot to do with the community's involvement. The third component of the ceasefire program is the ability to provide services, wraparound services for those people that we've identified that are involved in the violent crime. It's not okay to say, we want you to change your life and not give them an alternative. So part of the ceasefire model is to provide resources, whether it's job training, housing, things that makes these guys more susceptible to living a productive life. And that is something that we work with our nonprofit organizations, the city's Measure Y program, other groups that have stepped up and really been a part of that program. So it's not all law enforcement. It is the community getting involved and the services that are provided to folks that want to stay out of trouble and want to live a productive life. And that's actually our goal, is to make sure that everyone heads in that direction, because if this model is to be truly successful at some point, we want to make sure that all those components are working together. So that is our goal. That's our strategy that's been employed. Ceasefire is something that we're doing. We started it back in September, and we're constantly evaluating to see where we are. We've seen some significant result in violent crime over the last 6 weeks. I'm not at liberty to talk about some of those, but you will be seeing a lot of stuff later on as we cobble together the stats to show where we are and what we're doing over the last 6 months. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? My name is Robin Bonner, and I'm 20 years old, and I'm with the Center for Young Women's Development, as well as the Bay Area Urban Debate League, where I do youth organizing and youth mentoring. I would say the great way to sort of kind of decrease violence in the community is to empower the young women and men to sort of kind of see themselves as the leaders that they are and not followers of the system, and being prone to be in the system from what they're seeing. At the Center for Young Women's Development, we focus basically on young women who've been incarcerated in the underground street economy, who've been involved with prostitution, young mothers, and basically anything that goes on in the street. And we bring them into our center as a safe haven for them to sort of kind of rehabilitate themselves naturally naturally and through our services, to feel that they could excel from their current place. As opposed to being seen as a statistic of the system, they're going to take what they've been through and they're going to heal, and they're going to go through multiple processes to get out of that system. And in return, what they're going to do is go back to their young sisters and help them get through what they just went through, which is basically our motto. And the reason why it works so well is because instead of having a psychiatrist tell you what your problem is and what you should do, you're going to have a young woman who went through the same thing you went through to help you be a better person for your own life, as opposed to the Western philosophical ways of doing things. On the flip side of that, at the Bay Area Urban Debate League, we feel that it is very, very important to teach our youth how to read, write, and recite. The reason why I say that is because when you get involved with the law, that's what you want to know to be able to get yourself out of a bad situation. And by teaching our youth how to read policies and laws and sort of kind of articulate themselves in all of their environments, we sort of kind of reduce crime in that way. Because instead of going out on Saturdays and going to smoke weed and go to jail and do some of these things that we know they're prone to do, they're going to come to a tournament, they're going to come to a workshop, and they're going to get educated on a Saturday. So by the time they leave, they are so tired and so fried that they want to go home and sit down and chill out. And that's been some of the best models that we've been using throughout both organizations that I'm connected with, to sort of kind of keep youth and young women off the streets and away from violence. And I would say the reason why it works better than traditional models, as opposed to having an elder talk to a younger person, is because since we're peer educating, we're talking to each other, we know best what's working for us in our generation, as opposed to the older generation telling us how things should go and what we should do. We're talking to each other and we're creating our own sense of community. Because we have a community that we're come from, but we're going to be stepping into a whole nother community and problems and issues that we need to be able to prepare ourselves for as a community and as a young-minded, spirited people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Excellent information. And Sister Robin, I have to tell you, in the 28 years that I've been doing this law enforcement thing, my passion has been young folks. So to hear you and to hear what you had to offer, outstanding. Every organization should be partnering with Robin and the organization she partners with. Our second question we're going to address to Attorney John Burris and Pastor Zach Carey. And the question is, how can we engage our broad community in violence reduction efforts? Attorney Burris?
This is actually a pretty interesting question for me, because the nature of my practice and what I do every day is represent people who are in fact caught up in the system itself. I have done criminal defense work for a period of time, not as much anymore. More I'm representing people who have been victimized by the police in some way. And so that, which is very important to me as to how to deal with that. Now, part of that process is, how do you get the police and the community to work in such a way that you reduce the kind of violence that's associated with that? And there's no secret, not only here in Oakland, but as I'm around Northern California, representing victims of police misconduct in various cities, I can see that there is this lack of trust, if you will, that exists between the police officers, some members, and nothing should be all. Okay, there's no such thing as all police officers or all community people. But there is systemic issues that exist, and that is that there is a clear distrust of the police in many communities, and I might add, without editorializing it much, that there's some basis for that. On the other hand, the police have seemingly a manner in which they deal with the community is a way that fosters that distrust. And so some years ago, I wrote a book, Blue versus Black, Let's End the Conflict Between Cops and Minorities, where I thought about what we really need to do here, because to me, the decreasing of violence and the violence in areas that I work really requires an understanding and a communication to exist between the community that is affected and the police officers who have to serve that community. And without doing that, you can't really have an impact, a substantial impact on crime, because the police need the community to assist in solving crimes, and obviously the community needs the police to be protective of them. However, if the police, and it's a symbiotic relationship whether we like it or not, one needs the other in order to be successful. But in order to have that relationship, there has to be a readjustment in attitudes, both by the police who serve the community and the community that works with the police. It's almost a chicken and egg question. As I see it, having been involved in this for well over 20, almost 30 years now, and representing over 1,000 people in various cases, I recognize that it is a challenging issue, because we really do want the community to be able to assist the police, and we want the police to respect the community. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to have a major impact. So some of the work that I think is important is in how to bridge this gap. And to some extent, I don't really even know if what we've been involved here in Oakland with the case, this agreement, the NSA agreement that's called, has really had the impact in terms of positively impacting the community as it should have. A lot of money has been spent, a lot of time has been invested. I've invested a lot of time, the chief has invested a lot of time, but the day in and day out question is the community feeling safer about their relationship, one, in terms of how they relate to each other, and number two, their respect for the community, for the police, and whether the police respects them. I don't know that that has been unduly been successful, but on the other hand, we must try. I fundamentally believe we must try, and I think that part of that is having more meetings and developing a better understanding between the police and the community, and that's really, that's an attitude problem, that's a cultural problem that exists within departments, because, you know, historically there's this view in some communities that the police are occupying forces, that they really aren't engaged in the community, and to some extent that there's a lot of truth to that, because most of the police officers do not live in your communities. They live wherever they live, and they take their money and they go spend it elsewhere, and even though many want to do good work, to some extent they haven't developed the connection that's necessary. So from our point of view, as we deal with the whole question of how to deal with reducing crime and violence in the community, we've got to develop a relationship with the police itself. And so that requires many more meetings. That requires a plan and a structure. There are groups that are here that exist. That requires the leadership of the department and the leadership of the community to come together and try to forge programs that go to the culture that exists, that has caused this real conflict over the years that's taken place. It can be done. It must be done. All of us are here so we can exchange ideas about how to get that done. Thank you.
As Pastor Carey comes to the mic, I'm just going to ask the panel member to speak. This is not a room with a sound system, so if you could just speak up a little bit more. I heard it's having some challenge with people hearing in the back of the room. I also want to remind panelists, after the two respondents to each question go, if you have something else that you want to add in, or don't feel as if you've answered your question, you don't have another opportunity to offer up some ideas or comments.
Well, I don't know why you told me that. I just take all the time I need. I am the preacher on the panel, so I may as well just take up their time. See, Jordan only talks in public when he has to, and the lawyer only talks when he's challenging the court, the jury, and I preach every day, all day, every day, trying to get the community involved. And we can look at this problem, and we can look at systems, and we can look at plans, and we can look at all of these different things, thinking that someone's going to come into our community and save us. Well, nobody's coming to save us. And there's no particular plan or organizing movement that's going to fix this solution. This is going to take the community as a whole to come together and to say something about this violence. You know, we always talk about, you know, there's a difference between our community and every other community, but there's no difference. I think when we look at our community, we have digressed in the fact that we don't have pride in areas like we used to. And I know that's a tough thing to say, but I have to say it today. I think we need some tough talk. And we need to have tough conversations with one another in order for things to change. So let's be real. Let's have a conversation in here today about what can we do to change our community. First thing we have to do is become active. We have to be activists again, and we have to be involved. Look at your neighbor, say, neighbor. Neighbor. You got to say something. Silence is deadly. Let's just look at Oakland in the last 5 years. 559 homicides. Come on, that is unacceptable in any civilized community anywhere. Now, if this was a different community, you can believe me, if it happened in Montclair, if it happened in San Leandro, if it happened in any other city, it would not be tolerated. But the reason why it's tolerated in our community is because no one wants to have a conversation or say anything to anybody about it. So my challenge was for my church and for my congregation that we wanted to be involved. We didn't just want to have church every Sunday and just on Wednesday night and act like everything was going to be okay and we were going to go to heaven. We know that we are doing the funerals of the young people that are dying. So let me ask you a question. If we don't have any young people, who's going to carry on the torch? These are questions that we need to ask each other. So our efforts from True Vine Ministries in Oakland, California, is that we wanted to have an impact in West Oakland or in our community. So what did we do? We came together as a church on a Wednesday night and said we want to participate in some kind of way. But the first thing we say, most people say, well, what can we do to fix this problem? Isn't that what everybody's saying? We can't do anything because now what has happened is that we have become desensitized to the violence in our own community. Those are just young people acting a fool and nobody's ever going to be able to say anything to them. So what we did, we looked at our history. Somebody say our history. Our history. And we took what happened in the civil rights movement, the lunch counter sit-ins, where they said we're going to sit here until you arrest us or serve us. So the next thing we said as a church, well, we're going to go in wherever there's a homicide in the city of Oakland. We're going to take our church and we're going to stand out on the block and we're going to protest against the violence. And so the first thing a person will say to me is, what is that really going to do, Pastor Zach? Well, let me tell you something. It'll give a contrary opinion that everybody in the community does not agree with what's going on in our neighborhood. Anybody in here agree with that? Because we need some help. And I don't think that we're going to be able to work our way out of this situation just with the police. So I have a good relationship with Chief Jordan. I believe that he's going to give us an opportunity to hire some police officers out of our neighborhood. Matter of fact, he's working with us right now. So if we can continue to collaborate, bring our forces together as a community as a whole, I really believe that we can bring some change about in our community. But we have to remember one basic premise, is that the community is not just the church. We always want to blame the church, but it's the people who made the movement. Dr. King didn't make the movement. The movement made Dr. King. He was just happened to be the right person for the time. And so here we are. This is our hour because this is our civil rights movement. This 292,000 African Americans who have been murdered in this country since 1975, and it's not on the front page of every newspaper and every television station in America. Shame on us for being silent. So the community, look at somebody next to you, say the community, which includes you, must say something.
everybody, just as Pastor Zach just did. He used his outside voice so that everybody in the back could hear him. I want to ask everybody that comes up to the mic, because you're going to get your opportunity real soon to do that.
Just to be very open, I do agree with what Pastor Carey is saying. However, I have a different perspective on that for the community. In all honesty, we could read what the chief puts out in his reports, and we can go to community meetings, and we could, organize ourselves. We could go to church on Sundays and Wednesdays and Tuesdays all night long, or whenever we choose to show up, and we could talk about our problems. Or in actuality, we can start educating ourselves more on what's already going on and how we can combat that. Because we're talking about old problems here, we're not talking about new solutions.
Right.
A lot of people are talking about, well, the police don't do this, and this is what we need to do. What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing as an individual to help people be better in society and in the community? And I'm going to be very honest with you. I've been reading about this for the past 5-6 years. I've been going to school reading about this really hard. A lot of people cannot read. They cannot read. And it's very sad. Very, very sad. They cannot read and they cannot recite. So when somebody tells you, here's a pamphlet on your rights in your community, here are the police people who are going to be riding around here from 9 to whenever, and they have this right at their front door on the floor sitting there, and they choose not to read it, they put themselves in a bad predicament for when they meet somebody who is or isn't doing their job. But they blame the police, but they blame the community, but they blame the media. But do they take advantage of themselves and what they are and are not doing? Can we at least be real about that? That's something that I think needs to be more present in our communities, and that we need to sit down and take some time to just observe, because we're complaining at times. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't speak up and that we shouldn't say what's wrong, but we have to do a little bit of a critical awareness here on what's going on in our communities and how we as a people can be better together, but to do it the right way, because the system's already set up. Civil rights movement happened. It was successful. I'm standing in front of you right now, and I'm not supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in jail. I'm supposed to be picking up some cans or something. I'm not supposed to be articulate like this. The civil rights is present. It did its job. Now we have to move forward past that and not continue to look at problems as if they're going to forever exist. We have to be able to say, okay, you know what? When I got that ticket and I didn't know about that, okay, what did I do wrong? How can I be better? How can I help somebody help themselves the next time around if they can't read, write, or recite, or go to school, or do those things that the pastor and that the chief are talking about? We can't just sit and blame the system for things. We have to talk to each other, as Pastor Curry said, but we have to take more responsibilities for ourselves as a people. We can't sit and say the government isn't giving us this and it's not giving us that. We're here, aren't we? We're eating, we're going to school, we're doing all types of beautiful things. So I would say to piggyback off of Pastor Carry On, we need to take some more responsibility for ourselves before we just talk about the system and what it is and isn't doing for us. Thank you.
And we're going to move on to our third question and respondents. And that question is, what is one approach that you may know of or you may have an idea about that is working or could work in other urban communities that has not been tried here in the city of Oakland? And we're going to call first to the mic Pastor McBride. He's going to be followed by the chief, and then if there's anyone else on the panel who wants to comment as well.
It's great to be here with everyone, and to my distinguished colleagues on the panel. We're just blessed, I think, to be able to share this space with all of you and our community members. This is a very interesting question, and my first response would be that there is no solution that is being tried elsewhere that isn't being tried here. That is a best practice. Junius Williams from the Urban Strategies Council gave a wonderful presentation some time ago, and he said this: if you look at the top 10 violence prevention strategies in the country, Oakland's doing all 11 of them. Somebody say amen, right? That we're not lacking programs. I believe what we're lacking is cooperation and collaboration. There is a spirit in this town, in our whole region, dare I say in this country, of radical individualism, where we as people and as institutions refuse to work together because we don't get everything that we want. The truth of the matter is that while adults argue, kids die. I'll say that again. While adults argue, children die. There's a passage of scripture that has been extremely compelling to me. The prophet Ezekiel says that God has no pleasure in the death of anyone. And that includes, to me, the perpetrator of violent crime as well as the victim. that all lives have value. I'll say that again. All lives have value. And lives can be redeemed if we as community members believe that no one should be known for the worst thing they've ever done in their life. So part of what we are attempting to do all across this country is mobilize faith communities and congregations to take our moral authority and place as one of the last remaining institutions in our communities to own the issue of gun violence. It is a point of fact that possibly the greatest gift to our communities in the 20th century is the storefront small church. Let me tell you why. That's right. On every single block in the urban community, you got what? A church and a what? Which one is open all the time? If our churches could see themselves as an institution, not just for, as Brother Zach said on Sundays, worship, but a hub of community organizing, community empowerment, community moral authority, community political power, then we can dictate the terms by which we have public safety, economic development, and the elected officials we want to represent us and hold them accountable. So part of what we believe is important right now is to have a very clear appreciation between the nexus. I love this word. Everybody say nexus. Nexus. Say it again, nexus. Nexus is in many cases this intersection, right? This collaboration, this synergy, if you will. We believe that policy and program must come together. Yes. Policy shape the ways in which our communities are structured. Programs deliver the services that actually impact those in our communities. Yes. Right now in this moment, we're talking about gun violence. There is a national conversation around gun access through policies like background checks, et cetera, et cetera. It is a shame that for whatever reason, because of the messaging of our elected officials in Washington, D.C., or our own kind of apathy, we are not injecting ourselves as black people and poor people in urban neighborhoods all across this country to see gun policy as a reason for us to lift up our voice and limit the accessibility of weapons in our communities. I don't know how many people have been killed by drive-by bats. Somebody say amen. Hello, somebody. Amen. The presence of weapons in our communities is an extreme problem that policy can't impact. It won't solve it, but it can impact it. This is a moment that we believe all across the country we are engaging clergy and community-based organizations to make sure that we are calling our elected officials at the state and the federal level to enact more common sense gun reforms. We also are very convinced that this nexus of responsibility must encompass a few areas. Personal responsibility. We believe that every person in our community must take responsibility for our own actions. Amen? Amen. We believe in communal responsibility. Every community must take responsibility for the neighborhoods in which we live in. We believe in institutional responsibility, that every institution that finds itself in a community must take responsibility for that community and not be so obsessed with their own success, but the success of the community. We believe in government responsibility. I am not one who believes that the government does not have a role in solving these problems. I pay taxes just like everybody else. These tax dollars are my tax dollars. They're not the mayor's, they're not the governor's, and I love our president sometimes, but they're not even his. These are our tax dollars, and tax dollars can go into best practices that can reduce violence all across this country without sending more of our young men and women to jail or to the grave. So we believe that part of what we have found all across this country that is working. We love the ceasefire strategy because it is the best evaluated strategy in the country that reduces gun violence without sending more black men and women to jail. And it provides a context for that kind of collaboration to happen. Preachers are getting in a room together. Law enforcement are getting in a room together. CBOs are getting in a room together. Formerly incarcerated folks are getting in a room together. Even criminals, people who have rehabilitated their lives, getting in a room together, bringing our best selves to figure out how do we stop the violence. Yeah. And I got to tell you, as a pastor, and Zach can concur with me on this, preachers don't get along. Somebody say amen. But we do. We do. Right? But my point is, right now we have clergy working together in Oakland and all across this country. Detroit, Camden, Dallas, LA. They don't get along on anything else but stopping this violence. And if we as a people do not put our own pet peeves and our own hurt feelings and our own histories of political and financial gain on the sideline and work together with willing people like chiefs who are willing to work with us, like lawyers who are willing to tell the truth, like young people who are willing to speak their truth and be involved, if we do not collaborate, if we do not cooperate, then there is nothing else that will save us. I believe that what works best all across this country, cooperation and collaboration. Thank you.
It's hard to follow a preacher, but I'll try.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor McBride. I think one of the things that the pastor talked about was collaboration and cooperation. I do agree that we have about 15 programs that are working in the city of Oakland, but one of the things that we don't have is sustainability. Okay, so we start stuff and we stop and we start again and we stop, and so if you look at one of the things that we could do better, as the question asked, is to sustain the efforts that we're doing right now. The other issue that I think we should look at is to treat crime, this violence, as a public health issue. Yes. Okay? And I'm going to talk about two particular areas. One I'm an expert in, and that is teenage pregnancy. Okay? Wow. I say that because I'm a father of 2 teenage girls. All right? They're not pregnant, so. But about 3 years ago, I met a young man who just came out of prison. And we sat and talked about, what's going on in the streets and what's happening here in Oakland and what happened in prison. He said, Chief, if you really want to impact violent crime in Oakland, you need to look at, how these kids how they're being raised, and look at the teenage pregnancy rate in this county. Because by the time a kid becomes pregnant, if she's a teen, that kid is likely to be unsuccessful throughout their lives because the support system is not there. And a lot of the kids that he's seen in prison has been born to mothers who were teenagers themselves. And you look at I'm not talking about you, ma'am, but I'm glad that you're doing okay. I'm just sharing a story that he told me. And
Big
so,
voice. Big voice.
All right, big voice. I'll try. I'm a little hoarse, but I think we need to look at that. And so there's some research that's being done to figure out what is taking place in these kids' lives that are causing them to become pregnant at an early age. The other thing that we got to look at is the mental health factor. Okay, you look at people that are homeless, people that are out on the streets, the people that we're encountering. We have to look at them from a mental health perspective and how can we fix that at an early age. A lot of these people want help. Okay, they need help, but because of the mental health issue, they're not able to get that. So I think if you look at the crime issue as a public health issue, I think that's a program that I think the city, the county should work together to address with the proper research, the proper resources, and be able to sustain whatever efforts we're going to have, because we try stuff all the time, trust me, and we don't stay with it, okay, because we're pulled in many different directions. And that is why I am so committed to ceasefire, because I think this is something that we should try. We're trying, and we have to be able to sustain it. And I'm doing the best I can with all the resources we have to keep it going, because that's the only way that we're going to be successful, is by sustaining it, by having the commitment from the community and all the other people that are here today to make it work. Thank you.
Very quickly, I would like to support all the comments that have been made previously, but I do think that there's not only there's a short run view, and there's a long view. The long view really goes to the education of kids at a very early stage. And I'll just say to you, as you watch what's going on with sequestering right now, one of the major events that's about to take place is the elimination of a large sum of money for Head Start. Head Start is one of these programs that has been proven to be successful, that if you give kids an early start in education, that will carry them through. Likewise, you have to deal with the early education from kindergarten to 4th grade, because those are the years when kids get firmly implanted and they have this sense whether they can be successful or not. Because cases I have seen is by the 3rd or 4th grade, kids who were bright-eyed at 1, 2, and 3, first, second, and third, have lost the gleam in their eyes by the 4th grade, which means the educational system in the long run is not giving these kids what they need, and so by the time they become teenagers, they're like souls that are lost. The second thing here, on the short run, it is important to follow through some of these programs. You have to give young people who are committing crimes an incentive not to commit crimes. Because if you don't do that, police can't be everywhere to stop violence. When we have kids like today, where this rapper was shot and killed down the street, there's nothing that any of you can do, none of you, that can stop that. I don't care how many meetings you have, how many different organizations you have. At the end of the day, you got to give these kids who are committing murders and robberies some incentive not to do it. And various programs can do that, and they can't be one-week programs. They got to be sustainable programs. If you don't do it, I don't care how many police officers you have. Maybe you might disagree. It's not going to matter because the police, people are getting killed in places where the community, where the police are not there. And so my feeling about this is you got to develop both a short-run and a long-term strategy and have incentives. I know Richmond is doing some things here that's reduced the crime, violence. I know Boston had this great program that's been successful. I know that they're trying to do some of that here. But you've got to have programs that are going to cause people to think that it doesn't pay and that there's a future for you, because you've got to have a future. If you don't have a future, you're going to continue to commit the kind of crimes that are short-term successes and long-term imprisonment or death.
Okay, first of all, I want you to give it up loud and proud. Okay, we've arrived at the point in our program that I told you I feel is the most important, and that's the point where we're going to hear from you. A couple of things that you have to do. You're going to come up to the mic, to the podium. You're going to speak into the mic, and you got to use that loud outside voice. I know you all have it. So we're going to ask you to do that. Panel members, please know that you can chime in. If you have a specific question for a specific member, please identify that panelist that you'd like to respond. We've heard some compelling ideas, some provocative opinions, but we've heard from the panel. Now it's time to hear from you.
I just add that one last thing, say let's all be respectful of each other's time as well. So if you have a comment or a question or a statement, let's try to get it out there so we can have as many voices as possible participate as well. And if we can just form a line along here for folks who want to come up, that would be a great way to get started. And you're first.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Chief Jordan, thank you very much for stating that. Also, besides what we know what's going on, when a person has a flat tire, they know they have a flat tire. So we're here for the solution, and I'm so grateful that you mentioned teenage pregnancy. I was a teenage mother, and the things that you're saying about sustainability, how our people, as black people, as a black young teenage mother, how we've been ridiculed by even our own, knowing that we have children to raise. These children have grown up to take care of grandparents and great-grandparents. And there are also children that have fallen by the wayside. So as a community, to the panel, as a teenage mother and a prodigy of a teenage mother, so it just didn't happen in my generation. However, I'm here to bridge the gap so that when it happens in continued generations, that we build up a stronger people. So how do you implement and impose with the love of Jah, Allah, God, whatever you may say, into what we're doing now to infuse the probable cause of a sustainable people? I know that's kind of deep. I'm going to take the pictures, okay?
Well, I'll just say that, at least my role, I believe, as a clergy person, you know, my calling, our calling, particularly if you take the whole of our religious tradition, is that our institutions are supposed to take care of what the scriptures calls the widows and the orphans, right? That we are called to step in and fill the gap wherever gaps may exist in our communities. And I do not believe that it is, there's anyone necessarily to blame individually. I think we are all to blame as a community, that we have created conditions whereby people feel isolated and left by themselves. So I believe one solution is for us to continue to figure out how do we link up our institutions and recreate that safety net, right? That catches people before they get in trouble, while they're in trouble, or after they get out of trouble, right? But we can't pick and choose when we're going to help folks. And we must take the shame and the blame away. And I don't believe taking shame and blame away frees us from responsibility. Right. I just think that it names exactly what is the problem before us, and we must continue to challenge ourselves to care for our young sisters who are actually having to raise these children by themselves. We must challenge our brothers to step in and continue to bear the responsibility of being fathers. And as institutions, we must not criminalize poverty in any form. And I believe if we advocate to that end, then we will create the kind of conditions that we all see.
Hi, arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you.
I got here a little late, but I'm always surprised when I hear these discussions, and the best program that I've seen from what I've read and from what I've heard for dealing with these questions is a program of restorative justice. Restorative justice is a program that's proven itself. It works to reduce violence and to hold people accountable for what they did and to knit the community together so that we have the kind of corporation around these issues that goes on and sustains itself and makes a difference for the whole community. The Oakland School District is now doing that in some schools, but because they haven't had the resources, they haven't been able to sustain it. But the restorative justice programs have reduced violence in many of our schools 60, 70% or more. When it was used in other countries, it reduced juvenile crimes by 60, 70%. We've had efforts here in Alameda County to institute restorative justice. Judge Gail Abriola and Seeds and Arjoy have been doing little bits of restorative justice everywhere. But there's been no support from the Oakland City Council. There's been no support from the Oakland Police Department other than going to a few meetings here and there. Here we have a successful program that we could quickly implement that would make a difference, particularly for our young people. I wonder why it's never come up and didn't come up here today. The other thing that I would want to do is ask Chief Jordan a question. Considering what he said here, considering what I know about him, considering what he said his desire is to knit the community together and make a difference, why did he invite Bratton to come out here to do Friends?
That's the question. That's the whole question.
All right, let me answer your first question, Mr. Rouse. Thank you. We actually have been involved in restorative justice. We have been involved probably for the last couple of years through the McCollum Youth Corps program. In addition to that, I am working with a group of people to train 24 officers here in the next couple of weeks, all of my school officers that are working in the middle schools, to be a part of the restorative justice program that you mentioned in the school district. So we are involved in that. We have a contract that we're going to be working with to get that signed, to hire the consultants to help train the officers to be an integral part of that restorative justice program. So,
Chief, if you could give a brief explanation of what restorative justice is for folks who may not be aware, that would be helpful.
sure.
We can't hear you in the back.
All right. Well, I'll try to be loud. But The restorative justice program is where we take kids that are involved in nonviolent behavior, some things that may or may not be appropriate for them to be incarcerated or sent to jail. And for example, if someone vandalizes your building, okay, so we get the kid and the owner together and we come up with a solution based on what's appropriate for this particular incident. And the kid may be asked by or be ordered by the judge to go and paint that person's door or whatever they vandalize, whether it's graffiti or whatever. And that is part of the restorative justice program, where it's non-punishment, non-judicial, but the kid really, the person's paying back to the victim something that they did wrong, and it sends a message. It doesn't go on their record, and they have to do certain things, whether it's sitting in front of a class, providing some kind of intervention, but it works because the victim or the owner of that property, along with the kid, have an opportunity to sit together and work out their problems, work out the solution to the problem, and it helps both ways. So that is what restorative justice is. It's not for every single incident. There's some incidents that are not going to be fall into that category. We do refer a number of kids that we come into contact with to the program through the McCollum Youth Court. And then with the training that we're going to be providing to our officers, we are going to expand that, because part of that solution is that the police and the community, as well as the victim in this case, have an opportunity to sit together at a table and come up with a solution that helps everyone involved. And the ideal behind that is to change behavior, change the kids' behavior by a non-judicial punishment or non-judicial program that helps bring the message and changes the kids' behavior. So we are actively involved in that. You're not aware of it because of some reason or the other, but we've actually been doing that for quite some time. So in addition to Bill Bratton, I've made this clear that Bill Bratton and some of the other people that the city have been gracious enough to hire as consultants are just that, consultants. They give us advice. It's up to me to decide whether I want to implement those strategies that they're going to recommend. At the end of the day, I'm the chief. I'm the person that's responsible ultimately to what's going to take place in this city. That's what I'm being paid for. That's what I was hired for. I am not going to do anything that will jeopardize our relationship with the community. I'm very sensitive to the lack of trust that everyone knows that's here in this community. We're working very hard to change that, and I'm not going to allow some program or some consultant who may or may not understand Oakland to dictate how we're going to run the department. They give advice. We have a lot of people giving me advice. People have given me advice for the last 25 years. I also give advice myself. That doesn't mean that people listen to it. But you have to have the opportunity to take in all, as a police chief in a major urban city like this, you have to have the ability to accept advice. And really, ultimately, it's up to me if I want to take that into consideration. There are a lot of good things happening right now in this community with the police department without the help of consultants. And I want to make sure that we continue to work closely. My vision for this organization is to bring the community together, and I will continue to work towards that end with or without consultants. Thank you.
Now, before the next, we have two panels. Well, I'm actually be very brief because we do have a long line here and we want to get some questions. So, Robin, come up, brief response.
Just briefly, I wanted to speak about restorative justice practices as a service provider standpoint. Somebody can create a curriculum or they can create things for us to do with young women and men in the community, but you have to remember that you have to pay people, you have to find a budget, you have to find a space, and you have to do outreach. And you have to make sure that you don't have loonies teaching young men and women on restorative justice and helping them create that balance. So yes, restorative justice practice, it does take time because you want to have the right people doing the right kind of work. You just don't want to hire anybody to do anything with the community to further grow the problem, as some people would like to call it. So yes, when the chief talks about programming and policies and all that good stuff, you want to make sure that you do have practices that are sustainable and not just one-hitter quitters that are going to just be around for a year or two, then they're over with. And then once the community gets to know them and people feel safe going there and they want to, you know, restore their lives and, you know, have a clean slate and do all that good stuff, if it's not sustainable, if you don't have the right people working there with the right type of mission, it's not restorative at all. So you have to remember that these things take time. In order for them to get did, you have to give it time and you have to help with the process and not disadvantage the process. Thank you.
Very quickly, I think that the issue of restorative justice is, as defined here, is not broad enough. The real major question here is the people who are coming out of prisons. And those people need to have their rights restored and being placed in a position where they can take care of themselves economically, health-wise, housing-wise. And in order to do that, we know that there's going to be a large number of people who are going to be released from prison very soon. Many of those people went to prison when there's disparity in the enforcement or the application of the drug laws. And so many of them were nonviolent who are now in prison. They need their rights restored in such a way that they can go back to work and not be burdened by these felony convictions. As you read Michelle Alexander's book, you know that there's a form of discrimination that exists, for legalized discrimination, for those who have felony convictions. So and when people have that and they got to go back, they're going to commit violence. So we got to have some way to provide an incentive so they don't re-offend and they don't have these criminal records. That, to me, is a form of restorative justice that is absolutely necessary.
Amen.
Okay, I guess this is more a comment than anything else. To me, the beginning of everything starts with personal responsibility. Yes, that's for yourself, that's for raising your children. As mother of 3 grown children, 4 grandchildren, and now 1 great-grandson, I was probably tougher on my kids than the police or the military could ever have been. But not to sound like Archie Bunker. I mean, it's good to have gun control legislation, but that's not the only way to kill somebody. I think he said in one of his shows, would it make you feel better if they got shoved out of windows? We have this woman in San Francisco whose boyfriend poured gasoline on her and set her afire. I mean, it has to do with your own, you know, life is valuable. Thou shalt not kill. By the time I got to church, I already knew all this stuff. I probably could have done the preaching. But and something else, I've worked in the legal field for 31 years. One of the first things I noticed is this, I don't know if you want to call it self-hatred. People will tell the most ridiculous lies in family law. We have had instances where people are reporting people to social services for just craziness. There's a case in Southern California, and I think that's probably helped somewhere, been happening other places too. A young woman and her boyfriend were behind the bleachers, and they were teenagers. She accused him of raping her, and he went to prison for 10 years. And she contacted him when he got out on Facebook, of all places, and saying that she would like to help him clear his name, but she didn't want to give back the $1 million that her parents sued the school district for. All this kind of stuff to me says, I mean, I'm not going to tell that kind of a lie on somebody, but to let somebody serve 10 years in prison and at no point come forward and say, okay, we were kids. I mean, you know, that's the kind of stuff, to me, that is covered under personal responsibility. And her parents should have been able to tell her, look, you're going to have to tell the truth at some point.
Thank you.
We're going to ask you to be brief, but come on up because we want to try to get as many voices out there as we possibly can.
My name is Johnny Davis, and I would like to say to Ms. Bonner, thank you for your enthusiasm and your commitment. We don't have all the answers. I think one of the things that I've been really concerned about is that there are so many of us out here doing work, but we don't work together. And that word collaboration, because we're chasing dollars that aren't there.
Yes.
And so the commitment of saying, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. We were recently forced, our organization, from one side of San Pablo to the other side of San Pablo. And it was like night and day. And I remember my first day on the other side where we are now and looking out the window and seeing the action that was going on and the young women that were there and thinking, oh my God, I really like the other side of the street. But we had to come up with some solutions in order to exist. We're right next to a liquor store, so there is constant movement. And we ended up by deciding to build a relationship with the players on the street. Easy identified. Easy identified. And so just about 3 weeks ago, we invited them for lunch, 8 of them, and we left our clients in another place. And we served them on china and glassware and silver. And we treated the 8 that we invited as our guests. And it was amazing their response to us, because we've been building this relationship since September of last year. And so maybe if we all could really sit down and talk about what we're going to do together, my little idea and your little idea and your little ideas all expand into this big thing, instead of me trying to tell you who I am and my organization is this. How about if we forget about who we are, and it really is important to work with the people that are really needing our help. And that's all I have.
I'm going to read the first part so I can do it quickly. You guys talked about accountability on all levels, collaboration and unselfish cooperation, upstream approaches that result in prevention and hope. But Pastor Mike, you said something that really made me think about the whole gun, that we as a people, as a black people, we should be front and center in that issue. So as I thought about it, what I want you to talk about, or all of you to talk about, is that sense of safety and well-being that we as a black people don't have. So when I think about, I don't just think about, well, if you give up your gun, then all the bad people have guns. I also think about things like, okay, the NRA, a lot of people don't like the president in charge, and so maybe all the white people are going to get the guns. So we don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering, is that why maybe we're not front and center in that issue?
So I had the pleasure of meeting with the vice president in a closed door room with 12 other clergy right after the Sandy Hook shootings, and it was very clear to me, number one, that the administration and members of Congress had no commitment to talk about gun violence in urban cities, because they did not believe that it would produce a pathway to winning on legislation that they felt in their heart would broadly impact everyone. I pushed back very hard on all of those folks as they said that, and part of what came out of that conversation to me is I believe that we are not involved in this national conversation because the way the conversation has been constructed, we have not seen ourselves in the national conversation, thus we do not enter it. I want to suggest, though, that there is a politic of fear that is rampant in our country that we, I believe, certainly as a pastor, a person of faith, must counteract. It is not the case that owning more weapons will create more safety. All studies show that if you have guns in your home, you are more likely to be killed by that gun than other people's guns. It is important, I think, for us to appreciate that what is happening in our communities and even across the world or the country right now, the most tragic form of death are suicides by guns, accidental deaths, and the murders by guns. If we took those out, we are the only developed country in the world that has this number of deaths by guns. It is the presence, 300 million guns in this country, 314 million citizens. That is astronomical. 40% of all these weapons are being sold without background checks. Guess where those guns end up? East Oakland, West Oakland, Richmond. Policies can change that. All right, that's one step. But then I also believe that all of us that live in communities where we feel unsafe, we must go back out into the neighborhoods of our communities. People say we're going to take back the streets. The truth is we abandoned those streets. And our young people are left on those streets trying to fend for themselves. If every adult in this room got courage and priority of time to not meet with each other, but go into the street, walk the neighborhoods, put your arm around these young folks. I'm not talking about once a month. I'm talking about every single day. Yes. These young people will respond, and they will trust us to be the adults. I'll close with this story. An elder told me that in a village in somewhere, there were all these young elephants, and they just were running rampant all over the place, all over the place, all over the place. And they flew in some big elephants from another part of the world or country, dropped them in this village, and all of a sudden, the young elephants that were ravaging villages began to fall in line. We need big elephants. And those elephants are us. It is us. And I also want to say there's no amount of money we can pay ourselves to save our communities. We better be ready to volunteer and sacrifice to save our children, or we are kidding ourselves if we think the money is going to come in the short term. You got to do the work first.
Let me just say,
but the second part of that is that the conversation is based on our children killing each other. And we know that in America, they are always talking about the Second Amendment right. But I remember back in the 50s and 60s, you couldn't come into California without crossing the border and they asking you, why are you coming in? Right now, you can come across the border of California from Oregon, from Arizona, from Nevada, bringing in these illegal guns and dropping them off in the communities of our neighbors. But watch this. This is how they're framing the conversation, though. So when someone is murdered, the first thing they say, it's gang related. What? So every murder that's happening in Oakland right now is gang related. Well, I beg to differ with that. I believe that all of us, especially those who live in East Oakland, most of the people that live in East Oakland go to work every day, but they're getting caught up in crossfire because of these illegal guns. We cannot take every gun off the street, but the bottom line is we have to stop that illegal pipeline that's coming into our community that are killing our children. Because there's no reason on earth that a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old should have a gun. Now, they don't want to talk about that, but we need to have that conversation. Because when we were growing up, I didn't know anybody that had a gun, maybe one person. Now we have this influx of guns in our community, and our children are dying, and then everybody's saying, oh, it's gang related, it's gang related. No, it's not gang related. Nobody is safe in our community right now because of the proliferation of handguns that are entering into our neighborhoods. We have to do something about that.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor. This is the last question for today, but I want me to say, because I know people like to get up and move out as soon as that question is asked or responded to, is that if you want to stay in touch, there's a couple of ways you can actually do it, right? There is an internet site that's been set up. It's called Black Link. You can actually post your comments and get more information about this session and other sessions that happened today. If you need more information about it, you can actually go out to the table where you registered and they can give you more information. But it is called Black Link, www.blackling.ning.com as well. So if you don't get a chance to speak here, you have something you want to say, something you want to share, there's an opportunity to be able to do that as well. Last question.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. My name is Rodney Ferguson. I write a blog called A Voice for Black Heritage. Sister Bonner, you mentioned literacy. These folks don't know how to read. I have a simple solution. I used to teach adult literacy in Richmond, California with every kind of person you can imagine for 20 years. The one thing I couldn't get off the ground because I was a government employee was I wanted to have literacy programs in every single church. So when you talk about churches and everyday activity and being a big elephant, if you want me to help you set up a little literacy program in your church on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so people can read the Bible or read a job application, I'm challenging the pastors here to get a literacy program in their church, and I'll try to help you get some grant money. I've written a lot of grants. So the question I have, would the religious community, both Christian and Muslim and Jewish, because you guys are church leaders in your communities, would you guys be willing to have those kind of programs that actually do education in your churches?
We have one for 15 years.
Fantastic.
So not only will we commit to doing that, I think it's important for all of us to just appreciate, again, a lot of us don't go to church, right?
No, I understand that.
So a lot of people aren't even aware that there are programs happening in some of the churches very close to you. So we'll certainly be willing to help open that up and make that available. At least the clergy that we're working with, we're not working with every single clergy person in Oakland and Berkeley and Richmond, but we will make ourselves available. Let me just say this, March 10th and 17th, we will be sponsoring a National Gun Violence Prevention Sabbath. where we're inviting congregations, many of which have already agreed in this area, to focus on gun violence prevention, the gun policy conversation, the mental health conversation. We invite you to get your pastor, your clergy, your house of worship to participate in that. And every Friday night, we have about 40 to 50 community members walking East Oakland neighborhoods, the most dangerous neighborhoods, connecting with individuals. Pastor Zach does this on Saturdays. We have others doing it other days of the week. So please follow up with us if you'd like more information on exactly how to plug in. And we would love to continue to expand the coalition to stop violence in our communities.
And you can learn how to say something with us every Saturday at 11 a.m. You can go to Save on Facebook.com. Oh.
We're going to bring this to a close. Can we get a final round of applause for our panelists? And for participants who shared their ideas as well, voiced their comments. I also want to thank my co-moderator, Jan, for this wonderful. Thank you.